my father said, "Girls in this house don't need school, they need obedience." So I obeyed quietly. I educated myself in secret, built an empire in silence, and years later, the man who refused to invest $1 in my future stood in my office asking me for a job. Lyrica Callahan spent her childhood in a small, quiet town in Ohio, where life was strict and every day felt the same. Her father, Thatcher, ruled the house with an iron hand, making it clear that girls had no place beyond the walls of home. Lyrica watched her older brothers leave every morning, dressed in crisp uniforms, carrying their books and lunchboxes, while she and her younger sister, Maris, were left behind. Their days were filled with endless chores, cooking, cleaning, and learning how to appear proper and obedient. Any question about school was met with a sharp refusal, and Thatcher often said that education would only make girls rebellious and disrespectful. At night, after the work was done, Lyrica would sit quietly in the corner of the kitchen, watching her brother's letters and books piled high on the counter, wondering what knowledge felt like, what it sounded like, what it could make her become. She noticed the small injustices that shaped every corner of her life. Her voice was not valued, her curiosity discouraged, and her dreams dismissed. Even when she tried to speak up, her father's gaze silenced her, and her mother, Eloan, would nod or remain quiet, too afraid to intervene. Lyrica began to understand that this was more than strict parenting. It was deliberate control. Every rule, every denied opportunity, was designed to keep her small, to keep her invisible, to keep her dependent. But instead of breaking her spirit, these limitations planted a seed of determination. Lyrica noticed the gaps in knowledge, the unfairness, and the inequality, and she began to quietly imagine a life beyond her father's reach. She watched, she learned from observation, and she held on to the belief that one day, she would claim the future that Thatcher was so determined to deny her. Each day under his strict rules made her more aware of the path she would have to carve for herself. A path that no one could take away. When Lyrica turned 14, she felt a mix of fear and excitement as she secretly mailed her application for the state academic competition. She spent nights studying in her room, careful not to make a sound, memorizing facts and practicing problems until her hands ached and her eyes burned. She didn't tell anyone, not her mother, not her sister Maris, because she knew Thatcher would never allow it. When she received the letter announcing that she had won second place, her heart soared. Finally, something she had worked for, something that proved her mind mattered, had been recognized. But that joy was short-lived. The moment her father saw the letter, his face darkened. In front of relatives who were visiting for Sunday dinner, he took the envelope, walked to the fireplace, and dropped it into the flames. Lyrica's paper curled and blackened in the fire, as the room filled with the smell of burning paper. Everyone watched in silence, and Lyrica felt the sting of humiliation deep in her chest. Her cheeks burned, her throat tightened, and for the first time, she understood how deliberately her father crushed her achievements. Maris stared at her, wide-eyed and frightened, unable to speak. Their mother looked away, pretending not to notice. That night, in the quiet of her small bedroom, Lyrica sat on the floor staring at the darkened corner of the room. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but anger grew stronger than her sorrow. She clenched her fists and made a vow to herself. If she could not enter the doors of opportunity that others opened easily, she would create her own doors. She promised that no one would ever burn her dreams again. That moment became the turning point in her life, the point where silent determination replaced fear. From that night forward, every small act of study, every secret lesson, every whispered plan for her future was fueled by that one burning image. The burned letter and the decision that she would rise, no matter what. Lyrica discovered a small escape in the town library, a quiet place filled with dusty shelves and forgotten books. She began borrowing discarded textbooks, worn and marked with years of use, and taught herself everything she could. Math, science, history, she absorbed it all, page by page, working through problems she didn't fully understand at first but refusing to give up. She found a rhythm in the secrecy, carrying books home in her backpack and hiding them under her bed. The elderly librarian, Mr. Alcott Pierce, noticed her dedication. He had seen countless children pass through the library, but there was something different about Lyrica, an intensity in her eyes, a hunger for knowledge that refused to be quieted. Without saying much, he began allowing her extra time, keeping the library open for her after hours when no one else was around. He never asked why she stayed so long, only provided encouragement with small nods and gentle smiles. Lyrica's days were filled with chores and obligations, but her nights became a different world. She studied until the house was silent, her lamp casting a soft glow over the pages as she scribbled notes and worked through problems. Sleep was short, sometimes just 4 hours, but she pushed through the exhaustion because every moment of learning felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Maris watched from the doorway, torn between admiration and fear. She wanted to join her sister, to learn and grow in the same way, but the memory of their father's anger kept her frozen. Lyrica understood the fear and never pressed her, knowing that even a small misstep could bring punishment. Still, Lyrica felt alive for the first time, building a world in shadows where knowledge became her strength, and determination became her shield. Each night, as she closed her books and tried to rest, she carried a quiet confidence. The more her father tried to control her, the stronger she became in the secrecy of her own education. When Lyrica turned 17, she thought she had seen the worst of her father's control, but a new truth hit her harder than anything before. While cleaning the attic one afternoon, she stumbled across a stack of letters and financial papers tucked behind old boxes. Her heart sank as she read the documents. Her late grandmother had left money to be divided equally among all her grandchildren, money meant to help them with education, future plans, and opportunities. But Thatcher had taken it all, and used it to pay for her brother Darian's private college tuition, leaving nothing for Lyrica or Maris. The realization was like a punch to her chest. All the nights she had studied in secret, all the sacrifices she had made, and all the dreams she had quietly nurtured. Her father had deliberately stolen the chance for her to have an equal start. Rage mixed with heartbreak as she thought about the injustice. Her father didn't just prevent her from going to school. He had actively taken what was rightfully hers, reinforcing that he saw her as less deserving simply because she was a girl. That night, Lyrica lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling, letting the anger settle into a steady, burning determination. This betrayal changed something inside her. She understood now that she could not rely on anyone in her family to support her ambitions. She had to build her future entirely on her own, without expecting help or approval from the people who were supposed to love her. Every lesson she had learned, every hour spent studying in the shadows, became more precious. From that moment forward, she made a silent promise. She would succeed without a cent from her father. She would prove that the limitations and theft of her inheritance would not define her. The betrayal became her fuel, a reminder that her path would be hard but unstoppable, and that no one could ever steal her drive again. The day Lyrica turned 18 felt like the first step toward freedom. She had prepared for months, studying late into the night, memorizing every lesson, and practicing tests until she could answer questions without hesitation. Quietly, she registered for her GED exam, determined to finish it without anyone knowing. On the day of the test, she felt a mixture of fear and excitement, but she stayed focused, knowing this could be the ticket to a life her father refused to let her have. When the results came back, she had scored exceptionally high, enough to earn the attention of several scholarship committees. Without telling anyone, she applied to multiple schools, carefully crafting essays that explained her ambitions and her desire to overcome obstacles. Soon, one of the state universities offered her a partial scholarship. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to give her a chance to leave. The excitement of acceptance was tempered by fear of what her father would say. But she knew she could not wait for permission she would never receive. When Thatcher discovered her plans, his reaction was explosive. He stormed into her room, yelling that she had betrayed the family, that she was no longer his daughter if she left the house. He tried to guilt her, reminding her of her duties and the sacrifices he claimed he had made. Lyrica felt a wave of anger and sorrow, but she also felt clarity. She understood that this confrontation was the final barrier, and she could not let his pride or anger dictate her future. The morning she left, she packed one small suitcase with clothes, books, and a few personal items. Maris stayed behind, watching silently, knowing this was Lyrica's moment. As she walked out of the front door, a mixture of fear and determination surged through her. For the first time, she was choosing herself, stepping into the unknown, and finally taking control of the life her father had tried to deny her. College life was nothing like Lyrica had imagined. The dorms were small and crowded, the cafeteria food bland, and every day felt like a test of endurance. She worked long hours to make ends meet, taking a night janitor job in one building and serving tables at a local diner during the evenings. Her schedule left little time for rest, and more than once she fell asleep on library tables, textbooks still open in front of her. The exhaustion was constant, but so was her determination. Every dollar she earned, every page she studied, felt like a small victory against the life she had been denied. Her classmates came from wealthier families, many of whom never worried about bills or jobs. Some looked down on her, whispering about her worn shoes, her hand-me-down clothes, and the fact that she had to work while studying. Lyrica felt the sting of their judgment, but she refused to let it break her. Instead, she turned their mockery into motivation, letting it fuel her drive to prove that she belonged just as much as anyone else in those classrooms. Every insult reminded her why she was working harder than anyone, why she could not afford to fail. During her final year, Lyrica participated in a campus business pitch event. She presented her idea clearly and confidently, despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Among the audience was Rowan Keats, a venture capitalist who had seen countless presentations. Yet something about Lyrica's poise and vision caught his attention. He asked thoughtful questions, impressed by her knowledge and determination. By the end of the event, she had not only earned praise from professors, but had also planted the seed of a future partnership that could change everything. Exhaustion and hardship had sharpened her skills, and every moment of struggle now brought her closer to the life she had always dreamed of creating. With Rowan Keats's support, Lyrica took the first real step into building her future. She used the small seed investment to launch a logistics tech startup, a company designed to help rural communities access goods and services more efficiently. The irony was not lost on her. She was now creating opportunities for people in towns much like the one she had grown up in, where access and resources had once been limited. She poured all her energy into the business, working long hours, learning the ins and outs of supply chains, and solving problems that no one else seemed to notice. The early days were exhausting and full of challenges. Lyrica faced technical setbacks, skeptical clients, and tight budgets. But she had learned from hardship, and every obstacle became a lesson. She stayed focused, refusing to give up, even when others doubted her vision. Slowly, her company began to grow. Communities that had struggled to get essentials now had reliable deliveries, and her reputation for efficiency and innovation spread quickly. Within 5 years, her startup expanded into 3 states, serving hundreds of towns and thousands of people. Lyrica's hard work and careful planning paid off, and she became financially independent. She could now make decisions without relying on anyone, free from the restrictions that had shaped her childhood. Her company's success grew into wealth, giving her the security and power she had long dreamed of. Despite the long hours and the pressure, Lyrica felt a deep satisfaction. She had taken what she had learned in secret, from stolen moments with books and whispered lessons, and transformed it into something tangible. Her empire was not just a business. It was proof that she could rise above every barrier her father had put in her way. The success was hers alone, built on determination, intelligence, and the refusal to let anyone else define her limits. Back in Ohio, things began to fall apart for Thatcher Callahan. His construction business, once the pride of the town, started failing. Poor decisions and risky loans piled up, and projects that should have been profitable turned into costly disasters. Contractors pulled out, clients demanded refunds, and bills stacked higher than he could manage. Each setback added more stress, and the confident, controlling man who had once ruled his household now faced uncertainty he had never prepared for. Darian, who had benefited from all the money Thatcher had poured into his education, was no help. He had squandered the tuition on parties, unnecessary gadgets, and careless spending. When he dropped out of college, it was not a surprise but a confirmation of his father's blind favoritism. The son Thatcher had invested everything in, the one he claimed would carry on the family legacy, had become his greatest disappointment. The pride and confidence Thatcher had relied on to define himself began to crumble. Meanwhile, Lyrica's company was thriving. She had expanded her operations across multiple states and built a strong reputation for reliability and innovation. Her startup won a statewide infrastructure contract, a massive opportunity that would bring in significant revenue and further establish her business. Ironically, it was a contract that Thatcher's company had desperately needed to secure in order to survive. Lyrica's careful planning, hard work, and determination had positioned her to succeed where her father had failed. As the news reached Thatcher, he could only watch from afar. The very life he had tried to control, the opportunities he had denied, and the inheritance he had stolen were now in Lyrica's hands. The gap between their lives had never been clearer. Her success was not just professional. It was a quiet, undeniable proof that the limits he imposed and the mistakes he made had come full circle, leaving him to face the consequences of his own actions. Years had passed since Lyrica had last spoken to her father, and she had built a life completely separate from the household that once tried to control her. One afternoon, her phone rang, and the name on the screen made her pause. Thatcher Callahan. Her heart tightened, a mix of curiosity and old resentment stirring inside her. She answered, steadying her voice, expecting anger or blame. But his tone was different this time. He was not apologizing, not admitting mistakes, and not showing any remorse. Instead, he asked for help. His construction business was failing, and he needed financial assistance and a subcontracting opportunity from her company. He spoke carefully, framing it as family duty, reminding her of the blood connection and implying she owed him in some way. Each word felt calculated, a thin veil over desperation. Lyrica listened quietly, sitting in her office surrounded by the results of years of hard work. She remembered the award letter he had burned when she was 14, the humiliation and the deliberate theft of her opportunities. She could feel the same anger rising, tempered now by patience and control. This was the moment she had waited for, not to act in anger, but to hold the power firmly in her hands. She said nothing immediately, letting the weight of the request hang in the air. Thatcher rambled on, unaware that the years of control and limitation he had imposed were now irrelevant. The roles had reversed. She was no longer the obedient child who had to obey his rules. She was the one in charge, the one with the resources, the one who could choose how to respond. In that silence, Lyrica's mind traced the path from the burned letter to this call, realizing that the power she had earned allowed her to act deliberately, with purpose, and finally, with the ability to decide the outcome of the man who had once tried to define her life. Lyrica agreed to meet her father at her corporate headquarters, a building that reflected the years of hard work, struggle, and determination she had poured into her life. As Thatcher stepped through the glass doors, his eyes widened. Her name was engraved boldly on the walls, a symbol of authority and achievement he had never imagined she would claim. He paused, taking in the sleek design, the bustling employees, and the confidence she radiated. This was a world he had refused her as a child. They sat across from each other in a spacious office, the city skyline visible through the windows. Lyrica spoke calmly, her voice steady but firm. She reminded him of the choices he had made, how he had denied her the education she deserved, stolen her inheritance meant to help her grow, and disowned her when she dared to leave. Every word was deliberate, every sentence a mirror reflecting his failures back to him. Thatcher shifted in his seat, attempting to respond, but her clarity and control left little room for argument. Then she presented her terms. She would help him, but only on her conditions. He could work in her company as a probationary site supervisor, under strict rules and oversight. He would have responsibilities and accountability, but no authority to override her decisions. It was a position far below what he had once imagined for himself. A humbling step for a man used to power and control. Thatcher's pride was wounded, his anger barely contained, but Lyrica remained composed. She had taken the power he had denied her for so long, and now held it completely. This was not just about business. It was about justice, about showing that success was earned through determination, not privilege. She had built her empire from nothing, and now, for the first time, her father had to acknowledge her as more capable, more accomplished, and in control. Thatcher listened to Lyrica's offer, but his pride would not allow him to accept it. The idea of working under his daughter, following her rules, and answering to someone he had once controlled was unbearable. He argued, shouted, and blamed her for betraying the family, claiming that she had abandoned the values he had tried to instill. Lyrica stayed calm, letting him speak, knowing that his anger and ego would never let him see reason. In the end, he stood, slammed the door, and left her office, choosing pride over survival. In the following weeks, Thatcher's construction business could not recover. Projects collapsed, debts mounted, and clients pulled out. Without guidance, resources, or the humility to accept help, the company declared bankruptcy. The man who had once controlled every detail of his children's lives was now facing the consequences of his own decisions, powerless to reverse the collapse. Meanwhile, Lyrica focused on what truly mattered. She thought of her sister, Maris, who had watched her struggle and learn in silence, afraid to step forward under their father's rules. Determined to break the cycle that had limited their family, Lyrica offered Maris a full scholarship and personal mentorship. She guided her through applications, studies, and life decisions, providing the support their father had refused. For Maris, it was a new beginning, one filled with opportunities, knowledge, and encouragement. By helping her sister, Lyrica transformed her own success into something lasting. She ensured that the limitations, control, and betrayals of the past would not define the next generation. While Thatcher faced ruin and pride became his prison, Lyrica used her wealth, experience, and wisdom to uplift her sister. In doing so, she completed the journey she had started as a determined young girl, turning struggle into empowerment and breaking the cycle of restriction and lost opportunity in her family. Years after building her company and helping her sister, Lyrica turned her focus to a larger mission. She established an educational foundation dedicated to supporting girls growing up in households where opportunities were limited by fear, control, or prejudice. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship, and access to resources, giving young girls the chance to learn, grow, and pursue their dreams, something Lyrica herself had fought for in secret. Her name became known as a symbol of hope and opportunity, a woman who had turned hardship into empowerment not just for herself, but for others who faced the same obstacles she had. Meanwhile, Thatcher's life had changed dramatically. He lived modestly, carrying the weight of his past decisions. The pride and control that once defined him were gone, replaced by the reality of what he had lost. He had denied education, mismanaged money, and favored one child over another, and now he was forced to confront the consequences. Each day was a quiet reminder that the choices he made had allowed his daughter to rise above him, to achieve what he had never valued or understood. Lyrica's ultimate revenge was not rooted in anger or cruelty. She did not seek to humiliate her father or destroy him personally. Instead, she let her success speak for itself. Every business achievement, every scholarship granted, every young girl lifted by her foundation was a testament to her resilience and determination. Her life became proof that those who try to limit others do not determine their fate. Hard work, intelligence, and perseverance do. The moral of her journey was clear. When someone tries to control your future or place limits on what you can achieve, the most powerful revenge is to exceed their expectations. Build your own sky, rise higher than they ever imagined possible, and let your success be the legacy that they cannot touch or diminish. Lyrica had done exactly that, turning betrayal and limitation into triumph and inspire.
Some stories don't end, they follow you. If this one stayed in your mind, you know what to do.